Good morning, Americans and humans. This is your favorite alien here on the morning of Sunday, October 30th, 2022. And I'm sitting in today for Paul Harvey. Stand by for the rest of the story. Well, Americans, I'm sitting here at my little apartment here in Grand Villa, DeLand, Florida. An hour before I have to go to lunch, or half an hour anyway. But I was reminded on this October 30th, not of the War of the Worlds, but Paul Harvey's commentary that he did on the week of Christmas 1975. I forget which day it was. I believe it was the 22nd of December 1975 on his newscast, where he was complaining about the soaring prices of gas, whether his vision that he did in 1961 of Americans and senior citizens being taken care of with the rogue manner in Medford, Oregon, that he did in 1961. He didn't have the money to get and take care of that, and he said they were in trouble. And this was 1975. Remember, this was a bad period in American history. They thought it was anyway back then. Too bad they don't see today, huh? But back then, remember, gas was $1 a gallon and going higher. It was expensive. Food was getting expensive. Housing was getting expensive. You were heading into the deflation and stagflation and everything from 1975, culminating in 1980 with 20% interest rates. Aye. Well, Watergate was just passed, and President Ford had just pardoned President Nixon. And wow, 1975. Well, don't forget about the Mayaguez incident too. It was just a hard time to be an American. And I was sitting at the time listening to this on the radio at the Balboa High School Student Association little room we had. We had an office. I was just elected the sophomore class president, and this was 1975, the middle of the sophomore year. Hadn't done anything for the sophomore class at the time, and everybody thought that we were going to be the laughing stock of the class. Well, as I listened to him, and he was talking about his visit to the little planetarium in between the giving the news over in Chicago, in that little peninsula there in Lake Michigan. And he went to the planetarium, and they were talking about the birth of Jesus, and he was making comments about the fact that, hey, it was 6 BC, the Magi were not from the East, and all other comments that would really, by historical rights, make them right. But by Christian rights, they would really be angry at him if you listen to that. Because they never did visit Jesus Christ at the manger, because he was born in springtime, not winter time. The housing situation that happened that winter was already over with, so if they would have visited, the three Magi's would have ever visited Jesus, and by the way, the Bible does not mention that. You look at it all over the place, you won't find it. And he was right about that. I checked him. Everything that he said, he was right. And it goes against your Christian principles. But that doesn't change anything about the Christian faith of Jesus Christ, does it? I don't think so. It's still alive and well. Whether historical or not, it's still faith. And that's the part that you don't understand about faith. And this is what I was trying to understand myself in 1975. Because I had a huge responsibility that year. The bicentennial was coming up. By the time my school year would end in May of 1976, my class had done absolutely nothing. And the next month was January. And it would have been 12 years since the awful thing happened. And nobody had buried the hatchet. And what awful thing was that? I walked out of the little room at Balboa High School that we had there for the student association. Didn't lock it because I was coming back. But I walked about, 50 paces or so into where the American and Panamanian flags were flying on this dual flagpole, which was made out of brass, and the ROTC of the high school every day from 7 o'clock till dawn, 5 days a week, would polish that brass. It was spectacular, if you would have seen it. Those of you who graduated in Balboa High School from 1929 to 79 know what I mean. But in 1964, like Jesus Christ had his birth, there was an awful thing that happened over some stupidity, as in historical records that don't show Jesus Christ right. And people would take advantage of that and growl and start forming their own little things that all through the centuries would cause problems with other people. As in the Salem witch trials of the 1692-93 era, Bruno's burning of 1600. Well, two minor things, just like that, caused a problem on January 9th, 1964. And it caused two countries to sever their relationship, and the official record says 22 people died. There was a lot more that died than that. But anyway, the official record says 22. You had students that came over from the border, students that antagonized from this side of the border, meaning the American side. Because there was only one flag at the time that hung on this flagpole, and that was the American flag in the Panama Canal Zone. The Panamanian flag, which was the host country, which you guys paid rent to, was not allowed to be flown. Stupidity like that caused a lot of people to lose their lives. And after January 9th, 1964, and the 9 months that went after that, when both countries severed relations over a stupidity of flags. And to this day, I can't assure from Panama because I haven't been there since 1979. I've been there a few times, but only a few days at a time. So I have no idea how they went from 1979 to today. But here in the United States, you have learned absolutely nothing about that in your home country, you have learned absolutely nothing. Today is a good example of that. We're heading to Christmas 2022, 52 or so years later, or 57 years later, since Paul Harvey made his comment about Christmas 1975. And we have learned absolutely nothing up here, have we? And he was talking about Jesus Christ, and I was talking about the 1964. Where unofficially I buried the hatchet with the president of the Panamanian Institute in 1975. We couldn't do it publicly, so we did it privately. And I hope the Institute today, 50 some years, 60, almost 60 years later, 58 years later, have sustained that. Balboa High School hasn't existed since 1999. So maybe they forgot about it 20 years after I left. But like Paul Harvey was saying in his 1975 Christmas address, and I reiterate in the 2022 Christmas address here on October 30th, 2022, I doubt if the Panamanians learned anything from the 1964 situation. I know the Americans didn't. You can view your presidential or your midterm elections or your presidential elections of 2024. You haven't learned a single thing. You're still extremist, and you still care nothing about the old people. So what have we learned since Paul Harvey 1975? Mr. Harvey, you're there with the boss and my wife. And I can tell you, they've learned absolutely nothing from that 57 years later. Sitting in for you, this is your favorite alien sitting in for Paul Harvey saying, good day.